Hey, I'm Tom Howard, a cannabis business lawyer, and I manage collateral based advisory. This video is a practical breakdown of Virginia's proposed adult use cannabis retail framework as of 2026 legislative session. It's centered on HB 642. Now, this is important. It's a bill, it's not a final law until it passes and is signed. And even then, the Virginia Cannabis Control Authority can change details through regulations. If you're an operator or investor, the only thing worse than no information is confident misinformation. So we're going to stay grounded and focus on what actually matters for dispensary applicants and all the other types of licenses in Virginia. By the end, you'll know the proposed timeline, the license structure, what an impact means. That's what they do for social equity, and what's capped, what's still to be determined, and what you should be doing now to be ready when the window opens. If you need anything, visit us over at collateralbase.com. I will also leave a pinned comment for you. Here's our slide deck. We have 13 slides for you that will walk you through everything that's coming down the pipe in Virginia so that you'll be ready. Okay, this is an engineered market. They have state preemption, which is really interesting. That is how these states very often do it. The regulators called CANRA, they go from state to state. The states advise and counsel with CANRA, and things that have worked in the past tend to get picked up. So state preemption is one of those. There's no opt-out at the local level. For example, New Jersey or my state of Illinois or even California had those local opt-outs, and so you have half the state still banned, and then the other half of the state, you have too many licenses because they're the only place that can operate. They're avoiding that in Virginia. Now, the next aspect is they have a very optimistic time window of July 1st, hopefully having some applications being open by then and having some retail sales that hit by November 1st and having seed to sale tracking in place by September 1st. November 1st would be the ideal target date of retail sales. That really that math doesn't jive when it comes to how long it takes to create the products. Still, it's good to be optimistic. It means that they want the program to succeed and to roll out. Hopefully, they stick close to those. I know in my state of Illinois, when they tried to roll it out that optimistically, they were changing the legislation during the application period with new rules. And so he was trying to play a game whose rules were changing in real time. That may happen here. Of course, market control, there are limits. There are license limits. There are limited licenses. We will go over all of those. But first, let's do a little bit of consumer safety and public health. That is one of the reasons why you legalize, because it is safer for your state. For example, verification, they check IDs, packaging, child resistant packaging, potency caps. And so, unlike the unregulated hemp market that is sunsetting in November, the regulated adult use cannabis market will have 10 milligrams per serving, 100 milligrams per package. That is fairly uniform throughout the United States. And commerce, they may bring these online in the future, but very often when they're trying to get the program up, they don't have drive-throughs. Vending machines are very often never done. And the reason why is because this is somewhat of a jobs program, as we will be talking about unions and labor peace agreements later on. And so they want you to have employees, not vending machines, and then no internet platforms for sales. That's an interesting one. For example, in many states that they allow the online or the e-com, but you cannot fulfill the order online. You have to take payment upon pickup. That may be what happens also in Virginia. One of the more interesting aspects of Virginia is that it is a limited license state. There's many people in Virginia, I believe almost 10 million, and they have 350 state dispensary licenses to award. That's a lot to do in a single round. And so they may do that in multiple rounds. They might do it all in one fell swoop. If it is anything like what happened in Illinois, you need to apply now, because if you don't apply now, there will be a lawsuit, and that lawsuit will suck up hundreds of more of the licenses. And so get in, get it right, apply now. There are license limitations on that. And then, of course, there are setbacks, and the sales limit is 2.5 ounces per transaction, which is great. The Physical constraints are interesting. A 2,500 square foot retail space, that is pretty close to the size of our dispensary here in central Illinois, and it could be pretty tight depending on what all the regulations require. This is fascinating. Remember that I did say that CANRA goes from state to state, and one of the states has these businesses, Minnesota, and then also Missouri. This one is similar to both of those, and we will see what happens. In Missouri, they've split them between dispensaries and wholesalers, which are the producer processors. In Minnesota, very similar to this, where you can sell your own, and then you have canopy. And so you have canopy space, 5,000 indoor, 10,000 outdoor. That outdoor, you are lucky because it is substantially cheaper to get going in business outdoor, depending on what the regulations are for the indoor. You're not going to get that for the tiers that we'll be talking about later. The micro businesses, different than Minnesota, but similar to Missouri, are their own ecosystem. So these will be like your craft breweries of the cannabis market. Many of the hemp farmers are going to give priority, and they will be one of the licenses that are, I believe they're called impact licenses. We'll discuss those more. They don't call them social equity, they call them impact. And so the USDA qualified farmer has the inside track for micro businesses. Now, remember, there are license limitations. Micro businesses tend to be one and done. And so you could have a micro business license. There are, I believe, supposed to be 100 of these micro business licenses. That's right, there are. And they will have the ability to sell to other micro businesses. So the retailers that are selling the tiered canopy will not be the retailers that are selling the micro business canopy. This will be a dynamic industry as it gets off the ground, and there will be some bumps along the way. But hopefully, in 2, 3 years, that might be a very nice, interesting aspect of the Virginia market that is just absent from other markets throughout the United States. Here's your supply chain, like we were discussing. It's a limited, flexible limited. So, like the 35,000 square foot indoor, there's only going to be 5 of those licenses in total. And then they have different tiers, tiers 1 through 4, those types of canopies. One is indoor outdoor, and then 2 is indoor outdoor. One is 5,000 square foot. 2 is 10,000 square foot, 3 is 15,000 square foot, 4 is 25,000 square foot, and 5 is the 35,000 square foot. You can be somewhat vertically integrated in Virginia, but not really. There is a strict license cap of 5. So in theory, you could have a processing, canopy, retail, maybe a couple of retails. That will take millions of dollars. So it really depends on what your budget is and what your goals are for getting into the space in Virginia. This is a great aspect of it. I wish my state would have done it. Minnesota did it. I hope that your state does it in the future, but the CANRA hopefully recommends these types of things. State preemption. So typically there's these things called home rule, and then the states could opt out, or the municipalities could opt out of granting licenses. For example, here in my location of beautiful central Illinois, which is a winter day back there, I have a BLS region where my license had to be operational. And in that BLS region, only like 3 of the municipalities allowed you to be there. And and then those municipalities that allowed you to be there had a limit on how many could be there. They don't allow that in Virginia. Instead, what they're doing is that they can set time, place, and manner restrictions and zoning setbacks from like sensitive locations like schools. However, you cannot completely ban your retail establishments from operating in the municipality. So unlike what's happened in California or New Jersey or Illinois, where you have deserts and then, gluts of supply, hopefully it's a much more evenly distributed. And of course, the way the municipalities will try to get around that, for example, my municipality said Chuck E. Cheese is a school. And so then there's setback requirements on those sensitive locations. The impact license formula. This one is neat. This Every state tries to do it a little bit different in the sense that they have the ability to create, because there's nothing federal. And so they have the ability to create preferences inside their own rubric that they have. And they've done that in Virginia. And social equity is what we have here in Illinois. All the licenses are social equity. Cruel when you think about it, because It costs about $1 million to get a dispensary going in Illinois, and the people they award the license to by lottery don't have $1 million, but they do have social equity. So, what is an impact license going to be? Of course, it's 66% ownership and direct control. So, right there, like, it's just like turning the lights on and the roaches scatter. Your investment dollars are gone. And this is cannabis. And so, like, you cannot get a loan. It has all got to be in cash. And so, these impact licenses, which they don't really have caps, but they're having like target goals where I believe they want approximately 50% of the licenses to be awarded to these types of impact licensees. They will have a very difficult time becoming operational, and people will hurt. And it really sucks for them because they think that they have a chance, and then they realize that they can't go to a bank. They very often can't rent at a building because the rent, if you have a mortgage on that commercial property, it's very often says nothing illegal, and unfortunately, this is still illegal. So it can be great that they have them to be inclusive, but a catch-22 in the sense that it is very difficult to launch these. And what are they talking about? Now, first, it has to be the non-negotiable. So this was 3 out of the past 5 years in a historically economically disadvantaged community, and they have to be Virginia residents. And so they've lived between 2011 and 2025 in a jurisdiction to determine to be a disproportionately policed for marijuana crimes, or 3 out of the past 5 years in an economically disadvantaged community. And then they also need one of the following. And so you have that anchor plus one of the following, and that's a prior marijuana conviction, a family marijuana conviction. Very often, family is parent, child, sibling, spouse. Very often, sibling is not allowed. And then my wife, her dad served time for prison, and she was not a social equity in Illinois because he did too much. So, like, these types of creatures of statutes very often have bizarre exceptions, and there probably will be some here. The veteran status, those ones will probably be the ones that get to stand up, and the same with the distressed farmer qualified for USDA distressed farmer assistance in the last 5 years. They throw in the federal Pell Grants and 5 years in public K-12 and economically disadvantaged communities. So they're giving these to people who will have a extremely difficult time becoming operational due to capital crunch. And more operational hurdles, then you have to be union. So you need a labor peace agreement. All applicants need a labor peace agreement. And then they have to have the attestation signed by the applicant in a bona fide labor organization. There are several of these that are out there, like the UCFW, the United Commission of Food Workers. I'm not sure what the C stood for there. New Jersey required it. Illinois does not. Many states don't require labor peace agreements. Possession and site control. This is a slippery one. Okay. And so they may have premises designation in the application, and that is not necessarily site control. They are not requiring that until final stage approval. Here's the rub. The municipalities will zone out of existence many of these businesses so that very few of them can be found in their confines. And this disproportionately rewards, remember, like, there is no, I might be able to get a mortgage on my dispensary after it's operational and has been in operations for 6 months from a credit union that does cannabis lending. Good luck trying to find one. And so you have to be able to acquire the building, develop the building pretty much out of your own pocket. And then having that secured, having it zoned, we're going to see a race similar to what we're seeing in Minnesota right now, in the sense that there are only so many locations and there's a lot more licenses. And Virginia has a unique ability to be like Minnesota, where it appeared that it was going to be a limited market, and then all heck broke loose, and it was not a limited market. It was, but not for micros. And so you have a lot of dreamers with a lot of licenses searching for real estate, and that's the vine that they die on very often. And then ownership tracing, this happens all the time. I've litigated these issues, and I'm still litigating some of them. you have to disclose who owns the licenses. Transparency is an aspect of the regulation. So 100% transparency on your cap table. Change of control includes any 25% change or management appointment rights and board approval for ownership control changes. This gets difficult to police, the regulators take time because they have to look at all these things. They have to make sure, for example, that 66% or other changes. You see them in many locations and hopefully it works. The real thing is disclose. Don't try to be cute and get caught. Disclosing is, and then your consultant, if you want us to work with you, we have never had a license yanked. Make sure that you disclose everything because if you don't and they find out, you risk getting your license yanked. And that's the last thing anybody wants. Financial structure, taxation, and fees. This, of course, this is actually pretty reasonable when it comes right down to it. These change. And so the cannabis laws change, just like any other law. And this is a very new law in Virginia. So you're going to see amendments on an annualized basis. Very important to keep on top of it. Have a compliance officer or an attorney that is active in the Virginia cannabis bar. If there is one, I'm sure there will be. There's going to be hundreds of licenses. There should be. It will take time, though. So you have your total tax rate, state excise tax, local option tax, and sales tax. Not terrible, like 12.5% really isn't all that bad. Now, after taxes, let's talk timelines. This is a rosy scenario. These timelines could be delayed. They might hit them. It really depends on how organized they are and how they're going to do the licensing. When they try to rush, that's usually when you get more litigation risk. And so relaxing the timelines and allowing, because there might be QAs, questions and answers, depending on how much information goes into the application itself. For example, there's rules, the rules and regulations. When we had it in Illinois, you there was so much that they built into the statute when it came to the dispensaries. So the regulations were almost like codified in the statute. But here, they're a little bit more squishy, and so, like, you're gonna see these rules. Those rules might be really important for what goes into the application, and so, you're gonna have the portal open, hopefully on July 1st, and they start taking them. The regulations come after the portal opens, which, interesting. There might be some changes to the applications through the regulation, and so that might be where you get the elongation of the timeline. They want the micros to launch in October, and they want the market to open and retail sales to begin in November. Now, anybody who has cultivated the cannabis plant needs to know or does know that if you are going to begin retail sales in November, you needed a month of cure and packaging. You needed 2 months of flowering. Depending on what your veg strategy is, you could have that for, let's say, 6 weeks. And so 6 weeks plus 3 months. So there, and then you haven't been zoned, you haven't been built out, you haven't been granted any of your approvals to commence operations. Maybe if they allow an outdoor round, maybe, or if they license all of the hemp farmers and they're able to just turn it on into the outdoor grows similar to what they did in New York, and they relax to a certain extent the testing because trying to get your outdoor crop to test compliantly, that can be a challenge as well. So they have a very optimistic execution timeline, flawless execution if they pull it off. We will see. I would anticipate this to get elongated a little bit, but that doesn't matter because the most important thing is to be completely ready. And you have enough issues where the real estate is something that you should be looking at now, and also the ownership structure and your capital stacks. Those types of things we help companies with all the time. And even ourselves, even our own company, we help it out with. And so if you want our help on this, you can, I'll give you a link in the pinned comment. You might not be able to scan that QR code. You can email Sergio at collateralbase.com and he will reach out to you and talk to you about what's going on in Virginia. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments or Email Sergio at collateralbase.com and check out the pin comment.
The federal shift towards Schedule 3 doesn't rewrite your license strategy. Having the right dispensary footprint and operational playbook in place before regulators fully implement that new policy. That's where Collateral Base comes in. We help cannabis businesses win dispensary licenses, structure compliant operations, and manage stores. Link below to help clients navigate licensing, compliance, and operations so they win in the new regulatory era.